Joining us now, former Maricopa County, Arizona recorder and Cato Institute scholar Stephen Richer, Nevada Secretary of State Francisco Aguilar, staff writer for The Atlantic Adam Serwer, and MSNBC legal correspondent Lisa Rubin. Mr. Secretary of State, first to you. If you were not on that call in Arizona, were any of your election officials on that call?
They were not. We participated
Nevada, excuse
in
me, I'm sorry.
Yeah, no worries. We did not participate in the call. I didn't see the value of participating in the call. We know what they were going to say. Elections are run at the state level. We're preparing at the state level with our 17 counties to ensure that we have a strong 2026 election. The time invested in working with them at the local level is critical and more important than hearing the rhetoric that has already been debated and discussed among the voters in the 22 election. In the 22 election, every pro-democracy secretary won their race against an election denier.
Do you have any concerns about efforts going into 2026?
Absolutely. I think the concern is the misinformation that's being put out there by the federal government. However, we know that the state owns and has the right to run its election as they see fit for its citizens. And that's where we continue to fight. If they really want to be helpful in the elections process, they need to invest in elections. We need the resources to ensure that we have safe and secure and accessible elections. I say this all the time, that Nevada runs some of the safest, most secure and accessible elections in the country.
Stephen, who is Heather Honey?
Well, I want to begin with saying that we'd be happy to have Cisco back in Arizona. I know he went to the University of Arizona, so you're welcome back anytime. Heather Honey is an election fraud enthusiast who had a bit of a background in investigations, but she had no background in election administration. She's never been part of election administration, and she had no background in elections at all prior to 2020. She's somebody who started with the conclusion that the 2020 election was stolen, and she pursued it vigorously and intensively and consistently. And so therefore, she has risen and risen within the Trump orbit. And for anyone who's looking for, well, hasn't this all been going on for a while? How is this different than the first Trump administration? Well, it's because responsible actors, by and large, were in the Department of Homeland Security and the DOJ in the first administration. And now, at this point, we have some people who will probably tell the president not no, the election wasn't stolen, if he should ask again in the future, but let me find you a reason why it was.
So is that just going to be rhetoric? I mean, or can she disrupt elections? Elections are run by states. States have power over elections. It's part of, it's one of the rules. The federal government does not have power over state elections. But if she wanted to get involved or if she wanted to pursue something, what does she have beyond rhetoric?
Well, she has broad authority to investigate through the Department of Homeland Security. And then, of course, if it's accompanied by the Department of Justice, then they have broad authority to prosecute. And I promise you that can potentially disrupt an election. And if nothing else, it will make a number of election administrators nervous if they're simply calling spades a spade and saying, no, the 2020 election wasn't stolen, or no, the 2026 election wasn't stolen, or the 2028 election wasn't stolen. And so now I think for the first time ever, we have a number of people within these government offices who are willing to indulge the most fanciful of claims, and that simply did not exist in President Trump's administration in 2020, by and large, with the exceptions of people like John Eastman.
Can you tell me a little bit more about why states are responsible for their elections and why it is not the purview of the federal government, Lisa?
Well, there are some laws that essentially say that states have responsibility for administering their elections, and that includes elections through which we elect members of Congress, for example, and also presidential electors. There are certain things that Congress can control. But of course, Heather Honey wants to go around both sets of actors here. She not only wants to obfuscate the power of states, but in some of the statements that she allegedly made during that phone call, she's basically saying that she doesn't really want to have to cooperate with Congress either, that by declaring, for example, a federal emergency subject to her investigation, that she can grab control over some of these procedures herself without the permission of either states or Congress. That is, in part, Katie, what makes some of her allegations and descriptions of how she plans to use her authority as dangerous as they were on that call, as reported by The Times.
How can she possibly continue to say that with any sort of authority or credibility that the election was stolen and they need to do more investigations into it when there were 60 cases?
Well, and in particular, Heather Honey should know better, because in 2022, well after the 2020 election, and Stephen knows this probably better than anybody else, she was a witness in litigation brought in Arizona where she claimed that certain procedures used by a particular county could have allowed false ballots to be counted. And again, I'm reading from the New York Times story right now, but as she was questioned, she acknowledged she had no evidence that this had occurred on a widespread scale. She was fully discredited as a witness in that Arizona litigation, and a judge found, and again I'm quoting from his decision, would not come close to clear and convincing evidence that the election outcome was affected. And nonetheless, Heather Honey has it in her mind that more people voted than were entitled to vote across a number of states in various counties, etc. And she is not letting go of that idea, joining forces with people like Cleta Mitchell to say that they are the true defenders of election integrity, and they will get to the bottom of why there are discrepancies between voter rolls and the number of votes cast. They believe there is widespread fraud in who is registered to vote and who is actually voting, and that they themselves are the only ones who are willing and able to get to the bottom of it.
All right, so here's the hard question. I'm going to give this to you, Adam, and this is how cynical should one be about the next elections, 2026 or 2028? And I ask that because we've seen special elections that have gone untampered with even by rhetoric. I mean, Representative Grijalva, who has not yet been seated, still won her special election. Nobody's claiming fraud over that race. So how cynical is it fair to be in considering Heather Honey, and Donald Trump's own rhetoric regarding the next election cycle?
Well, I would say two things. One is that the allegations of fraud are more of a spiritual belief than a factual one. Their belief is that real Americans voted for Donald Trump, and therefore other people's votes really shouldn't count, especially if he lost. And therefore, it's fine for them to claim victory anyway. Donald Trump was told by his advisors that, there was no fraud in that election. We know that from the Jack Smith indictment and from reporting by sources like the New York Times before that indictment was handed down. The second part is that the voter fraud claims, we must remember, were pretexts for an attempted seizure of power, a legal, unlawful seizure of power in the aftermath of the election. Donald Trump tried to stay in office despite the fact that he had been voted out. And I think we should simply see all this rhetoric, whether or not there's a practical effect on the actual results of these elections, because the states do run them. We should see this as an excuse to say, well, I get to stay in power regardless of the results, after the next election if he does not win.
So on a practical level, Mr. Secretary of State, what are you doing, or what are you prepared to do in Nevada if the president or somebody in his administration, be it Heather Honey or someone else, claims that your results are not accurate, that they're fraudulent, and that they shouldn't be counted?
I think it's understanding that the average Nevadan doesn't share that belief. We've been through this issue. We are constantly preparing for these elections. We are building transparency efforts to ensure that information is given to the voter in real time. But it's also having Nevadans understand that there are 17 counties, there are 17 clerks and registers, 15 of those 17 are Republican Party members, that they are doing what's in the best interest of their local community. They know their voters, they know what the expectations are, and they're preparing for it every day. What rhetoric they're delivering is actually having, I think, unintended consequences. I think there's a small group of Americans who have this belief in what they're falsifying, but majority don't. They believe in the elections process. They believe that their vote counts and that they're going to continue to participate. And the more that they spread this information, the more likely it is it's going to backfire on them. 26 is a critical election for 28. And as the chair of the Democratic Association of Secretary of States, we have to ensure that strong secretaries get elected into every battleground state and other states around the country, because we need to ensure that 28 is going to be a solid election.
Stephen Richer, what if there are National Guard troops on the ground and people are concerned about feeling intimidated to go to the polls? Or what if there is another argument that these election machines are all being hacked? I know there's transparency. I know people like you and people like the Secretary of State have been going out and trying to say these things are not attached to the internet. I mean, Chris Krebs has said that over and over again. They're not attached to the internet. They can't be hacked. But that myth, that lie is still pushed. So there's that. But then there's also just the physical aspect of it. If there's national troops on the ground in some of these polling places, what's the advice of local officials?
Well, I would say if you're in a state like Nevada or Arizona, you can certainly vote ahead of time. You can vote no excuse early, and you can vote by mail. As for machines being hacked, not only are they not connected to the internet, but 97% of voters in the United States use a paper ballot. That means that there is always a non-hackable, auditable paper trail. And to my fellow conservatives and Republicans out there, I would say continue to believe in the rule of law. And the rule of law, the courts have shown consistently after 2020, after 2022, after 2024, that despite what people like Heather Honey have alleged, our elections have been fair, and they have been lawful, and they have been accurate. And if the courts rule such in 2026, then I hope and I trust that people will abide by the results of those elections.